So, some exciting news in the world of NHL expansion. A new entertainment district called The Gathering at South Forsyth is about to be constructed. As the name suggests, this district is going to be at the southern part of Forsyth County, Georgia. And yes, it's going to include a hockey arena. As you can probably infer, this arena is being built with the intention of attracting an NHL franchise back to the Atlanta area. But I'll talk about that later. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, the Smith Entertainment Group, which is the parent company of the Utah Jazz, has requested that the NHL initiate the expansion process so that they can bring a team to Salt Lake City. They'd be ready to host a team as soon as next season, since they already have an arena ready to go. When I found out about these developments, it made me wonder, what would a 34-team NHL look like with Salt Lake City and Atlanta? I'm going to talk about that, and afterwards, I'm going to talk about both of these expansion cities in more detail, and what my thoughts on these plans are. So, for those of you who need a refresher, this is what the current NHL conference format looks like. We have 16 teams in the West and 16 teams in the East. Adding Atlanta and Salt Lake City would be pretty straightforward. I'm using the city's NBA teams as placeholders for now, so just bear with me. As you probably could have guessed I was going to do, I added Salt Lake City to the west and Atlanta to the east. But this leaves us with a problem, because now there are 17 teams in each conference, and 17 is a prime number, which isn't exactly ideal when you're trying to divide the teams into divisions. So, assuming the NHL adds teams in Salt Lake City and Atlanta, I think they should make one minor change to the conferences. So under this realignment, the Nashville Predators have swapped from the Western Conference to the Eastern Conference. I already proposed this in my NHL expansion concept video because this just feels right in my mind. I mean, Nashville's so far east, for travel purposes it would make more sense if the Predators were in the Eastern Conference. Also, it's not like the NHL has never had asymmetrical conferences before. So anyways, now we have 16 teams in the West and 18 teams in the East. As for the division alignment, in the West we would see minimal change, with the new Salt Lake City team taking the Nashville Predators' spot in the Central Division. The East, though, is where things start to get a bit tricky. I narrowed it down to 3 division alignments. This first one is the one I like the most. We have Atlanta and Nashville going into the Metro, and Columbus switching from the Metro to the Atlantic. The Metro just felt like a more natural fit for Atlanta and Nashville. Having them in the same division as the Hurricanes just felt right. Also, I feel like they could form better rivalries with the New York teams, as opposed to like the Red Wings or the Senators. As for the Blue Jackets, well, I had to move one team out of the Metro, and Columbus made the most sense. All the other teams in the Metro have more established rivalries with each other, whereas the Blue Jackets are just kinda there. But anyways, yeah, this is the division alignment I like the most, but I'm gonna show you the other 2 I came up with just for the hell of it. This one has Atlanta in the Atlantic and Nashville in the Metro. Part of me likes the idea of Atlanta being in the same division as the Panthers and Lightning, but them being separated from the Predators just doesn't feel right. Which brings me to my third and least favorite alignment. This one has Atlanta and Nashville in the Atlantic Division, but the Bruins have been moved from the Atlantic to the Metro. Now, I'm sure it's pretty obvious what I'm doing here. I'm trying to replicate the rivalry that exists between Boston and New York in other sports, but separating the Bruins and Habs just doesn't feel right, you know? So yeah, that's why I like the first alignment the most. But let me know which of these 3 you prefer, or if there's some other 4th one you came up with, I'd love to hear it. Now I want to talk about the expansion cities themselves, starting with Atlanta. Now, I know there's a big portion of the hockey community that does not want Atlanta to get an NHL team again, and the most common reasoning behind this is because Atlanta has had 2 failed NHL teams in the past. But these same people suggest that Quebec City should get a team, which is extremely hypocritical considering Quebec City has also had 2 failed NHL teams. The Atlanta metro area is huge and still growing rapidly. There are some major potential sponsors in the Atlanta area like Delta Airlines and Coca-Cola to name a few. And also, Atlanta's ECHL team, the Gladiators, have been drawing great crowds to their games, so you can't say there aren't already hockey fans there. So if you're still one of those people who say people in Atlanta don't care about hockey, kindly go kick rocks. As for the project itself, just going off these renderings, it looks really cool. The Atlanta Braves did something similar where they built this district around their stadium. I've talked about this in previous videos, and I think that these types of projects are really cool. But something that surprised me is the fact that this project is going to be built over 25 miles outside of downtown Atlanta. And as someone who grew up in a medium-sized Canadian city, the idea of people commuting over 25 miles every day is insane to me. Like, I get not everyone does that, but some people do, which I think is crazy. And seeing how this project is being built with the hopes of housing an NHL team, I have to admit I was a little skeptical when I found out it was being built this far away from the city center. But as the NHL to Atlanta account told me on X, who you should follow by the way, most of the hockey infrastructure and interest in the sport seems to be concentrated in the city's northern suburbs. And another X user shared this map with me. This map depicts where sales for Atlanta Braves games have been coming from since their departure to their new stadium. And as you can see, it seems to be heavily concentrated in the north. So if that's where the interest is, then fair enough. What's interesting is that if you look on Google Maps, you can already see some construction work being done in the area. There's a new diamond interchange being built at US Highway 19 and McGinnis Ferry Road, and the arena location is going to be somewhere over here. But yeah, I think this is a cool project, and if it ends up bringing an NHL team back to Atlanta, then I'm all for it. Now moving on to Salt Lake City. Now, from what I understand, if Salt Lake City were to get an NHL team, they would be playing in the Delta Center temporarily, but I'm not too sure about that, so don't quote me on it. The Delta Center is built for basketball, so I'm pretty sure if you tried to fit hockey in there, you would end up with some unusual or unideal sightlines. But either way, the ultimate goal is to build a dedicated arena for the new NHL team. Personally, I think Salt Lake City would be a good fit for the NHL. They're a little on the smaller side, but they're no stranger to winter sports. They did host the Olympics, which definitely counts for something. So now we're left with the question, does the NHL even need to expand? Well, I'll let you decide that for yourself. I will say this though. It would be nice if the situation regarding the Coyotes could be sorted before any expansion happens. Worst case scenario for the Coyotes, they end up not being able to build a new arena. And if that ends up being the case, then they can always move to Salt Lake City, or maybe even another city like Houston or Kansas City. But on the other hand, I'm pretty sure any potential NHL city would rather get an expansion team than get the Coyotes, because they would be getting a team that's not really that great, and also NHL expansion teams in recent years have been kinda good actually. Why rebuild when you can pre-build? So yeah, Salt Lake City and Atlanta, the two frontrunners for future NHL expansion. Let me know, what do you think about these two cities potentially getting a team? And what are your thoughts on NHL expansion as a whole? I'd love to know. So yeah, thank you all very much for watching. Smash that like button if you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.